Hello, everyone, and welcome to another English language episode of Futucast. My name is Isak, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. Again, usually we do these in Finnish. Again, once in a while we do this in English. It's really fun. I'm glad we got to do one more time. In this episode, our guest is formerly a nuclear and missile operations officer in the U.S. Air Force and current YouTuber who has grown into one of the voices covering the war in Ukraine. Jake Broe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for me on the channel. It's great to meet you guys.
Absolutely. Nice to have you, man. Been really looking forward to this. I started researching for this episode, sort of figuring out topics and questions, while the peace process, the summits, the big shows of the peace process were ongoing. We weren't really sure what was going to happen in Washington and what was going to happen in the few days after Washington. Now we do, though. And what's your take of the situation right now? There's no deal. Do you even think there's a sincere attempt right now?
Nothing came of it. Donald Trump has no plan. He's never had a plan. Donald Trump, if you watch my videos, you know my perspective on him.
Yeah.
I was willing to give him an opportunity. He seemed, he's done this entire life where he just fakes confidence and BS's people, makes stuff up, lies. It's gotten him to the White House, so it's hard to argue with his success rates. But Trump did genuinely believe that he could stop the war. I am convinced of this now. During the campaign election last year, he said, Vladimir Putin's my personal friend, and he will do me this favor and just stop the war. That's delusional. That's nonsense. People like you and I, we know this, but Donald Trump did genuinely believe that if I can just talk to Putin, make a deal, we can get the killing to stop. Now, concerning making a deal, Donald Trump did not have Ukraine's best interests at heart. He was willing to do a lot, lift all sanctions, return all frozen assets, recognize Crimea as belonging to Russia. Russia gets to keep everything they've taken by force. Ukraine can never join NATO, no security guarantees. Like, the deal is terrible for Ukraine. But all Russia had to do to get this fantastic deal from Trump was stop killing people, stop going for more territory. And the Russians are unwilling to do this. So I think Donald Trump is genuinely shocked that Putin is refusing what he considers a really good deal for Russia because Putin wants more. Putin wants all of Donetsk, all of Zaporizhia, all of Kherson, but really we know. Putin wants Kharkiv, he wants Odessa, he wants Kyiv, he wants the entire Dnipro River. He's not going to stop at just the Donbass region. Potentially he wants parts of Finland or the Baltics or anything that used to belong to the Russian Empire and the old Soviet Union. So these summits, these meetings, they're all a waste of time. Trump is just 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. He does not want to alienate the Russians, spoil his relationship, because he wants to do business deals in the future with Russia. Like, this is just how Trump thinks and operates. He doesn't care about democracy, human rights, international law. It's just about enriching himself and enriching his family.
What do you think? This might be a hard question for you to ask, or for me to ask you, for me to ask anyone really who isn't Trump, what is your working theory of what is really going on here? What's Trump's motivation in trying to end this to whatever extent he is? Is it the fact that we just had the head of the Foreign Policy Institute here who had a pretty good take, I think? For Trump, politics is very often personal. And if you get along with Trump, that very much helps with the political. Maybe he just thought that with the momentum he's having right now in his foreign policy, that he could just have Zelensky and Putin in a room, and if they meet in the same room, it's all going to be fine. We're all going to figure it out. But as you said, quite eloquently, that isn't the case. So is your working theory just this, that he's completely underestimated the magnitude of the situation and the complexity?
Trump doesn't care what the Russians do. Trump doesn't care if Russia wants to redraw the maps or China wants to redraw the maps. Trump did nothing his entire first term when Russia was creeping into the Donbass region. Trump liked to claim during the campaign that there were no wars while he was president, and as soon as he was elected president, all wars would stop. That's delusional because Russia and Ukraine were fighting the entirety of his first term. Little green men seizing the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk and there was fighting. More than 10,000 people died over those 4 years in Trump's first term, and he did nothing. And the United States at the time said, the Europeans, you're on your own. So is Angela Merkel and Macron in Belarus with Zelensky and Putin. They signed the Minsk Accords to try and get the killing to stop. But Russia's intentions was always to go for more. They were the ones conducting hybrid warfare. They were the ones causing people to die. These rebels in the Donbass region were not building their own tanks. They were getting them from the Russians. That was obvious. So you're asking, what is Trump's motivation? And he just wants this issue to go away. He doesn't want to have a press conference every day and have a reporter ask him, why haven't you fulfilled your campaign promise? You said you could end this war in 24 hours. So this makes Trump look weak. It makes him look ineffective, which I think hinders his other objectives. Now, Trump is an imperialist. Trump wants to seize Panama and Greenland and Canada, subjugate them, and exploit their natural resources. So the mentality that Putin has, what he's trying to do, is exactly what Donald Trump wants to do here in North America. They want to divide up the world, make it multipolar, regional hegemons, and we're back in the age of empires. Whatever Xi and China wants to do in the Far East, if they want to subjugate the Korean Peninsula, take Taiwan, go into Southeast Asia, Trump doesn't really care. This is a nightmare. What I am telling you is a dystopian future of continuous warfare between three superpowers, which eerily sounds familiar to George Orwell's 1984, written in 1948, but yeah, he predicted this. And I am terrified that we now live in this future where Trump wants to go along with this. The United States is supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be defending international law, human rights, and promoting democratic efforts and causes around the world. The theory being, and this is still a theory that I support, that the more people living in freedom, the more people living in democracy, the less warfare we'll have. If people are free, the saying is that democracies don't go to war against each other. They're able to resolve their differences through the courts, through legislation, through dialogue. But dictatorships don't do that. Dictators only understand power, control, and they just... The dictators today have the same mindset as monarchs and kings and emperors from thousands of years ago. I have a smaller neighbor. What if I just went into their country, killed them, and took their stuff? I would then have more for myself. This is a very tempting mindset for men who have achieved absolute power within their own borders. Putin consolidated power in Russia. It took him maybe 8 years or so, but as soon as he did, he got imperial ideas, and he wants to restore the Russian Empire. And we have to stop this, otherwise these wars will never end.
Yeah, and we're dangerously close to this point. European leaders, well, Trump, but European leaders, even Zelensky, have hinted on, correct me if I'm wrong here, but have hinted on some kind of being more okay with territorial concessions, even if de facto, not de jure. And that inches scarily towards a world where aggression and annexation gets a stamp of approval, in a way. At least they're not talking about de jure recognition of annexed territories, but it's inching quite close to a world where you can invade a country, take land, and the international community will recognize it under the threat of force.
The average person alive today doesn't understand international law and the value of it, the benefit to everyone on the planet. Going back to the Treaty of Westphalia in the 1600s, we said borders are inviolable. We should stop trying to redraw the maps, because when you redraw the maps, millions of people die. And when we got to the level of World War II, I mean, the Treaty of Westphalia was brilliant. If we had stuck to that, great. But Napoleon obviously didn't adhere to that idea. But when we got to World War II and we developed nuclear weapons, all of the world's leaders recognized we can kill ourselves. We can kill every person on the planet now that we've figured out how to split the atom, and we can harness this devastating power. So we need a new document. This is the UN Charter, signed by all the world's nations to become a member of the United Nations. And this is a utopian grand visionary documents. Like, I've actually read the UN Charter, and it's a phenomenal piece of work. We had the world's smartest people come together to draft this document, and that was almost 80 years ago. And nobody alive today, I think, has read it or understand what is the international rules-based order. But the fundamental idea is that borders are inviolable. You cannot just invade your neighbor, take their stuff, and redraw the maps. And we're testing this now. Yeah. And I hope that we can pull back from the precipice and that we can have some kind of awakening moment. It's not going to come from the United States. We are leaderless the next 3.5 years. Donald Trump is just going to cause more problems for everyone in the world. But for my friends in Europe, you need to find a way to defeat the Russians as soon as possible. Send whatever resources you can, help Ukraine in any way you can. We need to defeat Russia today so that we can manage and mitigate the damages caused by Trump until he leaves office.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that. It's a perfect segue to my next question. This might be a long setup. I apologize for this. I'll try to make it as short as possible.
Go for it.
In Washington, a lot of Finns were quite amazed to see Alexander Stubb, our president, sitting around the table with a lot of leaders from major European countries. Finland should not have been there if it's just for the sort of geopolitical might of Finland. But I think Stubb has somehow made himself out to be this mediating figure who's able to, he's gained the trust of Zelensky and not least maybe perhaps Trump. But as we were watching this and as we were amazed in a positive way, it still raised the question of, is this the right way for Europe to align with America? Is this the right attitude to have towards America right now? Obviously, America is the closest ally to most European countries right now. Europe as a whole has been so for a long time. Obviously, the geopolitical situation has changed and is changing. And the regime has become much more transactional in the US and much more unpredictable. Fine. But is the alternative better? I read this in the Financial Times. I think it was quite well put. The alternative that I just described might feel a bit embarrassing, humiliating even, but isn't it better than trade war and completely kneecapping American support for Ukraine? Is Europe playing the game the right way right now? What do you think?
Yes, because Trump and the Russians are ideological kin. They are political allies naturally. They have the same mindset on the world. So anything that the Europeans can do to keep this pair, this duo, Trump and Putin, from fully coming together. The American people are not on board with this. When you look at the favorable or unfavorability ratings of Vladimir Putin, 88% of Americans dislike Putin. So this is the obstacle Trump is trying to overcome. He is trying to normalize Putin. He is trying to rationalize him and make him more appealing or sympathetic to the American public when we're not there. Like, for Trump supporters, they think this is weird, why Trump is so deferential to Putin. But obviously, for Europe's survival, you have to stop the Russians and the Trump administration from cooperating, allying, coordinating, working together. There is this MAGA theory that Trump wants to pull the Russians away from the Chinese, and then in the future, over the coming decades, Russia is our ally against a rising China. But that is nonsense.
The reverse Kissinger or whatever.
They're going to stick together. China and Russia have economically integrated, politically integrated, and they have the same objectives, which is the destruction of the United States. Sure, Trump acts like a dictator. He acts like one of them. That is fantastic for right now. But what if America pulls back and becomes a real democracy again in 2028? Trump can't guarantee he'll stay alive or be able to have his child or whoever be his successor and keep control of the American military. So for the Chinese and the Russians, they're on the same page, lockstep. They want to see the United States de-evolve into anarchy. They want our military to wither and die. They want us to retreat from all of the oceans around the world and allow them to do whatever they want. So your question about your president or prime minister, why was he at that meeting? And Trump just likes who he likes.
Yeah.
So if you're a tall, somewhat attractive,
Golfer?
Trump likes manly men.
Right.
And he also likes feminine women, which is why the Italian prime minister was there as well. He likes Meloni. So Trump just likes who he likes, but he likes people based on optics. He likes how they visually look, on social media or in pictures or on camera, or if they laugh at his jokes, if they compliment him on his stupid MAGA hats. Like, it's not hard to manipulate Trump because he wants to be manipulated. He wants to be flattered. In the White House yesterday, he was bragging that people are calling him the president of Europe. He actually said this. He said, people in Europe are referring to me as their president because I had this historic meeting with all of these leaders basically kissing my ass, and he loves it. So the Europeans are just buying time. I understand this is degrading and humiliating for the president of France with their thousands of years of history and culture to have to stand there and compliment Donald Trump on the font choice for his stupid hats in the White House.
All right, yeah.
This is embarrassing. We all know this. Anyone with half a brain understands how humiliating this is for Europe. But you guys have to do what you have to do to stop the Russians and the MAGA from gravitating and cooperating on stuff in the future. And it worked. We bought some more time. The only benefit that the United States is giving to anyone right now is we are selling weapons for profit to the Europeans that they can then give to Ukraine so Ukraine can defend themselves. And the Treasury Secretary just admitted on camera that there's a 10% markup. We are price gouging the Europeans for profits so that they can defend themselves or help Ukraine defend themselves. That is horrendously amoral. I am just staggeringly apologetic to you because I cannot defend anything that my government is currently doing. But this is the situation we're living in. We have to do the best we can. And nobody here that I know is giving up. Everyone that I know who opposed Donald Trump last year still opposes him. He's not won over any new supporters. He is not making progress consolidating the United States into this new authoritarian regime. MAGA is going to fail. Donald Trump's probably going to die in office. And once we have J.D. Vance as president, he will not be as effective as at controlling the GOP base. And we're having elections in 2026, and then we're going to have a change in the administration in 2028. I'm confident of this, but there's going to be some political unrest. There's going to be a lot of rioting. There's going to be economic turmoil. And a lot of bad stuff is going to happen to the United States the next 3.5 years because we made a disastrous choice allowing Donald Trump back into office in November last year.
There's a lot to ask there. I want to pick up on the China thing, a little China tangent. I'm not saying you're wrong. In fact, China and Russia being lockstep does reflect what their foreign minister, Wang Yi, said in a few months ago, in 2025 anyway, quite recently. He said that they can't, I think you cited this on your video, they can't let Russia win because that would mean that the US would be able to focus itself entirely on China, which is not what they want. But it was quite an interesting thing happened a few days ago. Xi Jinping, I think for the first time ever, congratulated Ukraine on their independence. Now, obviously, that's not the foreign minister saying that Ukraine should win. Obviously not. But isn't it a signal? Don't you think that means something? And if so, what do you think it means?
No, because China, as far as their concerns with international law and recognition of territory, they don't recognize any country that wants to declare its independence or become, redrawing the maps or whatever, because at the moment, Taiwan is technically China. Like, that was the Nixon policy going back to the 1940s or 50s. Taiwan was given the UN Security Council seat for mainland China, even though the national PRK, I forget the name of their political party, but the nationalists retreated to the island. The communists controlled the mainland, but it was still one China. And that was the one China policy that we've had for 60 years, is we don't recognize the independence of Taiwan. So the Chinese are very careful not to say, we're not recognizing, independence. We're not recognizing people seizing other people's territory. Like, China has not recognized Crimea as belonging to Russia, and they never will, because this is the game they play in the United Nations. As for China recognizing Ukraine's Independence Day, that's just a free political gift, because China is okay with the world entertaining the idea that they can be a neutral security guarantor in the event of a ceasefire. So if there's a ceasefire, China might be willing to send like 20,000 troops as peacekeepers between Russia and Ukraine, which is nonsense, because China is supplying 90% of the components used in Russia's war machines. China is not a neutral third party. They're an active participant. If China wasn't selling all this stuff to the Russians and buying their oil, like if China wanted to participate in sanctions, this war would have been over 2 years ago. Russia is only able to keep going because of China. And this comment about the foreign minister saying we can't allow Russia to lose because that hurts our national interests. Yes, they are preparing their own invasion of Taiwan. They want the United States and Europe to be distracted. As long as Russia and Ukraine are still fighting, this is a win-win for China. China does not care how much the Russians humiliate themselves. Like, the longer this war drags out, the weaker Russia becomes. China prefers that. China supports that. If Russia collapses, the country who gains the most is China, because they'll just roll their tanks north, take outer Manchuria, and maybe even take everything east of the Urals all the way to the Arctic. They'll talk about historical claims and protecting Chinese minorities in these regions, blah, blah, blah. Same thing all the dictators do. But yeah, I think China, if Russia destabilizes and has political problems, the Chinese will roll north. And honestly, they might have to. Like, if we have a problem with loose nukes, we need somebody to go into Russia to start securing nuclear weapons. And really, the Chinese military is the only one that can do it. It's not going to be the Americans. It's not going to be the French or the British. And if we want to stop regional Russian warlords from having nuclear weapons, then the Chinese have to go in and take it. But when dictators take territory, they rarely ever give it back.
Yeah. Another question based on your previous answer that came to mind. I know you've been more and more increasingly politically active. You even said that you might run for Congress at some point, so you're explicitly very active in domestic politics at this moment. A big question that I'm aware of in local politics is, yes, Trump, his approval ratings are quite down, quite low. And even the Republican Party's approval ratings are quite down. But not as much as the Democratic Party's approval ratings right now, which are even lower, which might seem remarkable for some people who don't know about this. What do you think, first of all, why do you think this is? And then secondly, what do you think the, new direction of the Democratic Party should be? How do you revive it?
So the Democratic Party's approval ratings are low is because they lost. They're losers. People don't like being losers. So yes, they deserve all of the scorn and ridicule they can be heaped upon them. But here's the beauty about American politics is we only have two teams. Because of the first past the post voting system, we're never going to have a third party. There are never going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 separate political parties because we don't have a parliamentary system. If we had proportional representation based on the vote and you had to build coalition governments, this is a much better form of democracy that lots of European countries have because it builds consensus. You have to cooperate with people who are not in your party to have a government that doesn't collapse. But here in the United States, we have two options. And you can either go with the flow in the current party, or you can just destroy it and then rebrand it, which is exactly what Donald Trump did. Republicans today, I don't recognize them. These are not the limited government, family values, conservatives that I grew up with my entire life. When the Republican Party lost, this was John McCain in 2008, and then lost again Mitt Romney in 2012, the Republicans were pissed off because they were losers. Nobody likes being a loser. So Donald Trump showed up in 2016 and said, our party sucks. We need to change it. I am the only one that can fix this nation's problems. Give all consuming power to me, and I will make everything perfect for America. And he's a cult leader at this point. 30% unquestionably follow him. They would drink poison for him. Like 30% of Americans are completely insane. Now, the next 20% that voted for Trump, they just want more affordable health care. They want to be able to afford rent. They want wages to go up. They want the grocery prices they pay to go down. And this is what Donald Trump promised to get back into office. He promised absolutely everything to everyone. I will bring down the price of eggs. I will make rent be cheaper. Like, he just lied and said whatever he could to get elected. And those are the people who are going to flip on Trump. Eventually, Trump's approval rating will go back down to 30% because everyone who had hopes that inflation would be better or the economic situation in America would improve, Trump's not doing anything to benefit anyone except himself. So your question about the Democratic Party, there's no leader of the Democratic Party. I don't even know the name of the DNC chair. Kamala Harris lost, and she's been on vacation the last 8 months. Like, when Trump lost in 2020, he kept doing interviews and posting on social media every day, and he was still de facto the leader of the party, even when he was in exile. But Democrats don't do this. Older people don't do this because they don't understand social media. The old way that elections were won, where you fundraised hundreds of millions of dollars and then bought 30-second TV ads, that doesn't work anymore. The Democrats outfunded and outspent Trump in 2016, 2020, and 2024. So how do they keep losing? And it's because Trump is the king of free media. He will go anywhere and talk to anyone. And if you just listen to somebody for like an hour or two on a podcast, you tend to hate them less. Like, once they become familiar, even if they're flawed individuals, you still kind of respect and appreciate them, at least for showing up and sitting down with Joe Rogan for 2 hours, or sitting down with Lex Friedman, or sitting down with Sean Harris, or whoever these, Theo Vaughn. Like, Trump did every podcast. He did every public appearance he could to get in people's faces. And even though he wasn't perfect, at least he was willing to have the conversation. People respect that. Whereas Kamala Harris didn't do interviews, didn't do podcasts. All she wanted to do was fundraise and buy 30-second TV ads. And Americans hate commercials. They don't want to watch TV ads anymore. So your question about the party,
Yeah.
the Democratic Party has never been weaker. Someone can take it over. We are going to get a charismatic, cult-like figure who is going to show up in 2027 and say, I am the answer. I am the solution. And at this point, I think Democrats will embrace it. I don't like the cult of personality. I would prefer the president of my country to be an intelligent, capable administrator of the federal bureaucracy. But that's not what humans want. That's not what our brains want. We want a friend. Donald Trump is a familiar friend to tens of millions of Americans. Even though he's a grotesque, disgusting, horrible person, he's still, I used to watch The Apprentice in the 2000s. I saw the Comedy Central roast of Donald Trump like in 2015. Like,
same, actually.
People just know him, whereas they don't know Kamala Harris, who was vice president for 4 years, and I never saw her. I never heard from her. So yeah, what's coming here, and we're already seeing it. This Mamdani guy running for mayor of New York, he's on social media all day, every day. Doesn't matter that he's a democratic socialist. People don't care. If they know you and they like you, they will vote for you, and they don't really care what your policies are. So another thing is Gavin Newsom. I don't know if you've been following this. He's the governor of California. Gavin Newsom is not behind his social media strategy. He has like 2 subordinates or interns who said, why don't we just make fun of Trump, like do Trump-style shit posting on your social media? And it's working. Gavin Newsom's polling numbers for, to be the Democratic nominee, it went from 9% to like 18% in a month. He doubled his supports. He gained hundreds of thousands of followers. He's fundraised $10 million. Like, Gavin Newsom will be the nominee if nobody else figures it out in the Democratic Party. I don't think it'll be Gavin Newsom. I think it'll be somebody else. I think somebody is going to just come out of nowhere, and he's going to have the best social media game in the world. He is going to be funny and intelligent and kind. This is what Democrats want. And it doesn't matter what his policies are. Nobody cares. As long as he's a likable, kind, intelligent person, he will be the nominee. And I think he or she, I'm hoping, will lead a revolution, and we can change the trajectory of America, because at the moment, America is turning into a police state. I don't really want to live here anymore.
Yeah, what a world where that's the future. Wow. Thanks for that answer. Let's go back to the war in Ukraine and the summit. I'm not 100% aware of what's going on right now. I'm sure all the parties involved in the peace process are working behind the scenes, making phone calls, having meetings in cabinets, and doing the sort of nitty-gritty of whatever that peace process entails, I'm assuming. But this obviously doesn't help Ukraine at the moment. They have to continue with the defense, and I'm sure they need to implement some other tactics and strategy. What do you think right now should be that strategy going forward if you're Ukraine? Do you change? I mean, yeah, recently actually, they have amped up their attacks on gas infrastructure in Russia. Do you think this could be some sort of joker card that might actually be a significant factor in perhaps ending the war? Is this the right way to go?
The last 8 months, everyone was talking about we need to get a ceasefire, we need to get a ceasefire, and the Russians are never going to agree to one because they don't want to stop this war. So Trump has even given up on that. People are also talking about security guarantees. We need security guarantees, peacekeeping forces, blah, blah, blah. That's never going to happen as well, because the Russians have said under no circumstances will they ever allow boots on the ground of Western or European forces. So there are no security guarantees. The only way for Ukraine to achieve peace and to make this war stop is through overwhelming strength on the battlefield. So what is happening is what needs to happen, and that is giving money to Ukraine so they can invest in their own defense production. These Flamingo missiles, these extended range Neptune missiles, Ukraine's incredible success with their recent drone strikes on refineries, this is the winning strategy. Ignore Trump, whatever he says, ignore the Russians, whatever they say, keep hitting these refineries. So 10 refineries have been struck just this month, knocking off at least 17% of Russia's oil capacity, refining capacity. This has led to shortages in the Far East, shortages in parts of Siberia, as well as Crimea. But we've now proven that Russia doesn't have reserves. Potentially the first 3 months of this year when refineries were being attacked, we didn't see any gas shortages because I think the Russians had available reserves. They were also still importing refined oil from Kazakhstan and Belarus. I don't think Ukraine is going to strike their refineries, but we don't need to. If we're seeing gas shortages at just 17% being knocked offline, then Flamingo missile, Neptune missile, whatever you got, Ukraine, keep going for them. But as soon as we have 20, 30, 40, or 50% knocked offline, that's lights out for Russia. If they don't have gasoline, people can't go to work. People can't restock the shelves in grocery stores. This is a logistics problem, a rationing problem, and this is going to finally, I think, disrupt life in Russia enough where this is going to cause the political instability we need to figure out a solution to Putin. This war only continues because of one man, and this war will not stop until that man is dead or removed from office by his own people. That's the entire war in a nutshell.
Yeah, in fact, I think Belarus recently decreased the amount of gas they are exporting into Russia, coincidentally.
Well, they probably need it for themselves. Belarus is doing terrible right now.
Yeah, that's right. Who have you talked to about this? I've seen the 17% figure as well. And it's an interesting point that this indicates that there are no reserves left, since obviously if there were, they would have been utilized. You wouldn't see these kilometer-long lines in some far regions of Russia. But what is do we have any idea what the tipping point might be? What the percentage has to be?
So by going after depots, because initially I was like, why would Ukraine just destroy, a container, a metal container full of oil? The oil inside itself is not worth that much, and the container is not that sophisticated. But then somebody explained to me this is about storage capacity.
Hmm.
For Russia to pump out of the ground in the Urals, they're pumping oil every day, all day. It has to go somewhere. It has to be stored somewhere. And if you destroy all of the depots that store it and there's nowhere to store it, then Russia has to pump less. So, how do you get the Russians to decrease output in the Urals if you're not going to, fly a drone to the Arctic Circle? And you just destroy all the storage capacity. And then they have nowhere to put it. So the wells have to then pump less. And the concern, I don't understand how technical it is, but people have said that if Russia decreases output or even stops output, then the well caps freeze in the Arctic because it's very cold up there. And if the wells are frozen, then they can't retap them. It's costly, expensive, difficult, and they need Western technicians. They need the help of Western oil majors to get production back online. So we've actually seen the numbers that Russia's oil production has decreased. They're also exporting more because they can't refine it themselves. They're selling to India, they're selling to China, they're selling to Saudi Arabia on these tankers. And then those countries are the ones refining it. But yeah, I mean, what's the tipping point? We're going to find out. We're going to find out in the next 6 months. So stay tuned.
There's been a lot of talking about the health of the Russian economy in general, and you've covered this topic as well. How is it doing, very broadly speaking? There's a lot to talk about there. Obviously, how much the government is spending of their reserves, how much of a deficit they're running in their budget, how much the economy itself has been turned into a war economy. That's basically the only sector growing at this moment. What will happen once it collapses? A lot has been talked about the banks in Russia. Could there be a possible bank run and such like? What do you know about the current situation, the economic situation in Russia? Inflation, for example. There's a lot to talk about there.
Well, inflation is double digits. We are going to get bank bailouts. So this is already public information that so many businesses and personal consumers are defaulting on their debt. There's so much toxic assets on the books of these banks. They need the Russian central bank and the Kremlin to bail them out. So this is going to be publicly announced next month in September. Russian banks are going to formally ask for a bailout. But this is reflective of the economy at whole. Russia's car industry has collapsed. Their only airline is doing terrible after that hacking. Their shipping industries are collapsed. Their construction and home construction businesses are all defaulting. There's two economies right now in Russia. If you have a husband or father or man in the SMO and you're making your $2,000 equivalent a month, you're doing fine. If you received a death benefit or a sign-up bonus, you're doing fine. But for everyone else, they're struggling because inflation is out of control. I don't remember what the number is, but something like 30% of Russians or Russians spend about 30% of their take-home pay just on food.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty high compared to Europe or America. And these companies are also reducing wages and reducing hours, cutting to 4-day work weeks or shorter shifts. The thing about economic collapses is nobody knows it's happening until it's happened. When there's a bank failure, they call it a panic because it happens very sudden. You don't see it coming until maybe the day before, and then something really bad happens. Now, Russia's technocrats are very capable. This central banker, Nubilia, or whatever her name is, she has worked wonders for the Russian economy. They've done lots of different things, but long term, like 20 years, Russia is screwed. The wealth fund of Russia saved up $600 billion prior to this full-scale invasion. That was to survive Western sanctions. Kyiv was supposed to fall in 3 days. We're going to take the capital city of Kyiv in 3 days. If Zelensky had accepted the helicopter ride and went into exile in London or Washington, D.C. or whatever, then the money that Putin saved up was supposed to guarantee the safety net and the social benefits of the Russian state for the rest of his lifetime. That's what he saved the money for. It wasn't to fight a war. This wasn't supposed to be a real war. Putin was not expecting mass casualties or for the Ukrainians to resist or fight back. So yes, there's nothing positive or good coming for the Russian state or the Russian people in the long run. But if we want this war to end and for Ukraine to get relief, we need to accelerate the process as much as possible. So how close are we? Nobody can say.
Yeah.
But all of the indications are there. Like every sector, every industry, every business in Russia is pre-bankruptcy or struggling. And nobody in Russia, aside from if you have a husband or father in the war zone, is doing well right now.
Yeah. I might be beating a dead horse with this question, since you already said, I think twice, that we don't know, which is a very reasonable answer. Obviously, we don't know. But do you think in our sort of implied educated guesses of how long they might last, we sometimes underestimate the ability of Russians to take shit and eat it, just deal with it?
I can't remember where I heard this quote, but the quote is, Russians, their superpower is they're willing to suffer more than any other people. I read a book about the Russian Revolution of 1917 and just how bad it was during World War I. And the Russians for 500 years have had insane, cruel, terrible rulers. Just like all of the czars were just inhumane, ungodly, disgusting, horrible people that did terrible things to the Russians. And I don't know why. I think it's the culture, the language, the geography, all of that is an indicator of what you're willing to tolerate. But I don't think we should allow the Russian Empire to reform itself. I don't think they're a positive force for good in the world. I think the 14 former Soviet republics that got their independence are doing much better today than they would have if they had stayed part of the Russian system. So yes, the Russians, due to their national pride, their stubbornness, and just their general cowardice, it's hard for me to throw stones as an American given what's happening in our political system. But I didn't understand the Russians. Like if you want to know me and my thoughts as an American going back 3.5 years, I said it. When I was making videos those first 2 weeks of the invasion, I was saying, we just got to get these pictures and videos out. And once the Russian people understand what's going on, they'll put a stop to this. They'll tell their governments they're not okay with bombing civilians and killing people and all of these horrible things. And I was wrong. I was 100% wrong. I think it was Anders Puck Nielsen who told me, when you see a Russian and they look European, they look white, they look comparable to a Finn or a German or a Danish. I don't want to insult you, but
of course not.
As an American, we see them as a European. Yeah. And we think Europeans respect democracy and human rights. We knew Putin was a strong man. Okay. But I had no clue that the Russian people were completely morally bankrupt, that they had no compassion or sympathy for anyone. The Donbass region, the city of Mariupol, these are Russian-speaking towns. And the Russians are raping and indiscriminately killing and bombing and destroying everything. And where's the sympathy? Where's the outrage? Where are the people protesting and rioting and committing acts of civil disobedience or whatever they can to let their government know they're not okay with this? And they rolled over. The Russian people are sheep. It's probably a third are nationalists in favor of it, a third are against, but they're staying quiet, and a third are completely apolitical and they don't want to think about it. But it's staggering that a country of 140 million people, and I rarely see anyone do anything to register their objections with what's happening in the war zone, what the Russian government is doing to the Russian-speaking people of Ukraine.
Yeah. I luckily do know some, and I do know them, and they do say that, but not enough to cause anything material in the country. That is true. And a lot has been said.
Here's the thing. The only good Russians are the ones who left. I mean, there's lots of Russians who just got out. All of the YouTubers, Konstantin, Nikki from St. Petersburg, NFAR, Roman from NFRK, Sasha. Like, I only know the only Russians I know that are from Russia. I know Russian Americans, but
Yeah,
the only Russians that I know are YouTubers who all got out. They all left because there is no future in Russia unless you're willing to be a cog in Russia's war machine that's going to keep going for decades until they're defeated.
yeah, yeah. And I must say, actually, all the people that I know speaking up for it publicly also did leave or have left even before. So yeah, it's easier to say these things out loud when you don't live in the country, for sure. The situation in the front lines, can we get a brief update on what's going on there? Obviously, the big picture of the war looks bleak. It's like a World War I style stalemate in trenches plus drones, I heard someone say. I think it might have been Perun who said that, which is quite brutal. Meat grinder is also a word that has been used. But in the past weeks, some developments have happened. Obviously, the Russian summer offensive hasn't really gained much until recently. There was an advance in Pokrovsk, if I'm not mistaken, and a rather successful counterattack. Anyway, I'll stop rambling now. You probably know much better about this. What's going on in the front lines right now?
Nothing of significance or consequence.
No.
I understand from the Ukrainian perspective, every farm, every plot of land is sacred. That is their sovereign territory. They are fighting and dying to defend their land. But as far as what is Russia paying to take that wheat field, to take that abandoned village, to take that destroyed city, the expression is a Pyrrhic victory, where what you gain is not worth the cost you paid for it. And this is the game that Ukraine has been playing for 3.5 years. Out-ratio the Russians. You have to be more efficient. You have to have 3x, 4x, 10x casualties for the Russians for every one you lose. I don't want to see any Ukrainian soldiers losing their lives. I don't want to see any additional territory lost. But you have to zoom out. You have to zoom out and look at the entire size of the war zone. And Russia's gains are just not significant. The Russians today control less of Ukraine than they did 3 years ago. In 2022, they gave up on taking Kyiv and Chernihiv and Sumy in the north. But even if you fast forward to the Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kherson, this was November of 2022, and Kharkiv in September of 2022, all of Russia's gains over continuous warfare, continuous attacks for 3 years. And they have not made up for their losses in Kherson and Kharkiv in 2022. This is embarrassing for the Russian military. I just don't know how anyone supports Russia and they can pound their chest every time a Russian flag is taken in a destroyed village of like 10 houses. So the lead up to this summer, there were all these terrifying headlines. The Ukrainians basically pulled out of Kursk in February, March, April time. And it was the Russians building up 60,000, 80,000, 120,000 troops in Kursk. They've got 30,000 North Koreans backing them up. They're gonna invade and take the city of Sumy or take the city of Kharkiv or something. Fast forward 3 months, they haven't even gone 3 kilometers deep. They've taken horrendous casualties, and their summer offensive failed. Now, as far as this salient in Kharkiv, this is actually not comparable to World War I. And, we've seen the movies, World War I, you've got hundreds or thousands of guys in the trenches, and then they have to charge across no man's land through the barbed wire and all that stuff. That's not what's happening, because there are no trench lines today, because you can't have them. Because of artillery and FPV drones and glide bombs, you can't have hundreds or thousands of men manning trenches. So for both sides, there are really just like these isolated foxholes, these dugouts that are underground. And yeah, there might be grooves in the ground, but there's nobody sitting in those trenches because it's too dangerous. So the war has become taking position like these intersections between these fields, basements, and houses for the Ukrainians and the Russians, they have to stay hidden and underground almost all the time. Otherwise, artillery, glide bombs, FPVs. So yeah, there are definitely pockets and holes in these lines because these are just basically isolated, spread out machine gun nests and dugouts. So the Russians found a gap. They're constantly probing with these sabotage groups, and occasionally they'll find a breakthrough and go an extra 5 kilometers or 18 kilometers, and then Ukraine has to have a fire brigade respond and then try and plug that gap. But as far as significant breakthroughs, this entire year, 8 months, what has been Russia's victory? They haven't taken Konstantinivka. They haven't taken Kupiansk. They haven't taken Pokrovsk. Sure, yeah, they're still gobbling up wheat fields, but those are kill zones. If Ukraine wants to concede an open field where there's no defensible positions to stay there, okay, that's not a victory for Russia. The Ukrainians are in the cities. They have the basements. They have the rooftops. They have the defensive structures. They're the ones taking fewer casualties. It's just trading land for time. And in my opinion, the Ukrainians have done a phenomenal job holding off the world's second most powerful military for 3.5 years, waiting for the Allies to get their act together and actually start sending them the weapons and support they need to win this war.
Mm. Speaking of that, what is that support specifically right now? We've already been talking about the sort of fledgling support from the United States recently, especially this year. Obviously, the support was massive before that. 350 billion is, I think, the number that has been repeated. I'm not quite sure what it is. I think it's around there, right? Europe has sent...
It was less than 200 billion allocated by Congress, and most of that is just spent in the United States.
Right.
Like, the problem is all these countries were doing it. If we go back 3.5 years, the brilliant strategy is we can help Ukraine and make it a win-win for both sides. We're going to allocate money to ourselves to buy new weapons, and then we're going to give Ukraine weapons ending the close to the end of their service life.
Yeah.
So if we allocate $10 million for a new missile for ourselves, and then we give Ukraine a missile that is 30 years old, it's still deadly. It still works.
Yeah.
But it's not worth $30 million.
Yeah.
Like, that was, I don't know what the 1990 price for that missile was, but we're charging ourselves top dollar today and then giving Ukraine something worth significantly less. It's still deadly. It's still effective.
Yes.
But it's not worth the dollar amount that we're claiming it is because we allocate the money to ourselves, defense production. That strategy 3.5 years ago was fine. That was a win-win.
Yeah.
We thought it worked. But the better strategy is just give Ukraine money. If you give Ukraine $8 billion to invest in themselves, the returns are infinitely higher than allocating $8 billion for ourselves and then sending old stuff that as soon as they fire it or use it, it's gone. But if they built a factory, then they can start producing their own stuff. So we figured this out about a year ago, 1.5 years ago, and we should have figured it out a long time ago, but it's working. These factories are now up. We are going to be getting a Flamingo missile a day. I don't know how many Neptune missiles they're making, but as far as drone production, we're seeing the results on the battlefield. So yes, what is being allocated? Germany announced they're going to spend $8 billion for the next year. Canada showed up. The prime minister, he allocated, I think, about $1 billion as well. We keep getting these headlines and then you never hear it from again. But lots of countries have been chucking hundreds of millions or billions of dollars at Ukraine so that they can produce their own drones, missiles, APCs, whatever they need to defeat the Russians. This is the better strategy, and long term will be better for Ukraine's security and defense.
Thanks for correcting my sloppy setup there. That was very important to make that clarification. Is that enough?
We're going to find out. I hope so. We can always do more. The combined economy of the European Union, Canada, the UK, let's ignore America, is over $20 trillion, whereas the economy size of the Russia is $2 trillion. So this is a 10 to 1. If the political will is there, for the Western Alliance minus Trump, we still got this. We can still win. And I have seen the urgency. I think when you look into the eyes of Macron, when you look into the eyes of Starmer and Merz after speaking with Trump, they understand the danger they're in. The danger for the entire European continent if they do not rearm and find a way to make the Russians stop as soon as possible. I see the urgency that wasn't there when Joe Biden was president, because everybody in Europe just assumed America would do the heavy lifting and find a way when Biden was not the guy. He just wasn't the guy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's for sure a lot of wake-up calls that Europe has to go through, not least of which this one. And yeah, I guess we'll see. Guess we'll see. Thank you so much, Jake, for this conversation. It was very interesting.
Thanks for having me on, Isak.
Thank you so much. And go Golden Knights, right?
Yeah, they're a good team.
They're a good team. All right. Thank you so much, listeners, for watching and listening to this episode all the way. If this episode raised any thoughts, questions, feel free to comment down below and subscribe to the channel. Plus, anything you do, liking this video, anything helps. All right. See you next time. I have no idea when the next English language episode will be, but we'll keep doing them regularly or semi-regularly. So stay tuned. Bye-bye.